Red, what are we talking about today?
Today, Twitless, we're continuing our discussion on who was the actual creator of the representation for the cinematic Deadpool. I'm sure you're thinking that Rob Liefeld is the creator of Deadpool. Anybody knows that. But where did the writers go for reference when they wanted to determine exactly how they would represent Rob's creation on film? Ryan Reynolds being one of the producers and main drivers of bringing Deadpool to the cinematic MCU universe, wanted a representation that felt very in the zeitgeist and very over the top compared to what was originally presented by Rob. The default for such a Deadpool is the Joe Kelly run of the series. And what we find here is the canonical idea of what Deadpool became when he was brought to film, but brought to life in the comic books, originally by Joe Kelly. This is the first issue where Joe Kelly breaks the fourth wall. However, besides breaking the fourth wall, he's also framing a very over the top, very comedic, very spectacular kind of figure, irreverent and more on the comical side than he is on the action side, which is what Rob originally gave us. And the one that might have inspired the writers a little bit more when they were crafting the original script for Deadpool 1. So we're going to now talk a little bit about Deadpool 1, the film, and how it might have been derived quite heavily from Joe Kelly's reading and representation of that character presented in the comic books. What did you guys think?
Let's take a brief pause to hear from the awesome creators joining us today and find out what cool projects they're currently working on.
Hey guys, if you love sword and sandal historical fiction with a healthy dose of ancient Roman and Egyptian fantasy mixed in, then check out Kyrie. We've got 450 pages printed so far, a fourth book on the way. Order your books today at curiecomic.com.
Modern day, classic superhero storytelling. Get The Adventures of Omega Girl, issues 1 through 5, now on Indie Planet.
Thank you to our awesome creators, and now back to the video.
Yeah, so in this issue, Deadpool number 28, we've got this character, this villain character named Alistair, who uses some kind of dark magic to trick Deadpool into encountering his supposedly deceased wife, Mercedes, on the streets of Atlanta, no less. And he also interacts with Bullseye, the assassin Bullseye, who's been tasked with assassinating his wife, Mercedes. Mercedes does not recognize Deadpool, and Deadpool he thinks he's hallucinating. Strange zoinks ensue. He becomes increasingly confused when Mercedes interacts with him. Tries to stop Bullseye from killing her. Fails to convince him to back off. So that there's a lot of punchy action scenes to the back half of this. You've got emotional turmoil. You've got fourth wall breaking. You've got a story world that's pretty, bouncy and irreverent and humorous, and it encourages the sort of the type of Deadpool that we're used to now seeing thanks to Ryan Reynolds today. So it was kind of interesting to see this manifestation and to kind of mentally think between the 1991 first the debut of Deadpool to 1997, how much mainstream comics, how much Marvel comics had gone through, and where we find it 6 years later, this particular property 6 years later. It's almost kind of bewildering.
I have a very interesting journey with Deadpool, and there's something about being in my age bracket, because at first this idea of like this character who breaks the fourth wall is very interesting and neat, and it's like, and he's unique. For me, my experience with Deadpool has not aged well. I've grown kind of weary of what they've done with him. It's very Rick and Morty to me, and this comic I really hated. I didn't particularly like the artwork for it, and the story and writing, all of it together in a package is a lot of what I find to be where comics went wrong. And I find myself increasingly going, please, let's go back. Just bring me back. I was saying this, I think, in a back room where I said, give me Rob Liefeld on his worst day than this on its
Yeah.
best than this on its best day. I want my superhero stories to not be so self-referential with jokes and things that you had to be there in a particular, you had to be watching the exact, episodes of Seinfeld at the time to get, where the jokes are going. And just where no one's taking anything seriously. We have Deadpool and Bullseye in an epic fight, and as opposed to Liefeld, where Cable and Deadpool are fighting and they're quippy, but they're taking the fight fairly seriously because Deadpool was kind of a villain, and that there was some stakes involved. Like, this story, they're just there's just word salad, just characters
Yeah.
just spewing dialogue, like they really like they're gonna just go out for drinks afterwards. There's constant references to Bullseye saying, "Hey, are we gonna get drinks after this?" And then it's just like, what are we fighting? Are we trying to go on a date? And that kind of lack of investment in what the superhero fantasy is kind of like became a cancer. And it Deadpool is, I think, patient zero for it, but it's definitely impacted a lot of other comics since then. And you can kind of see where this in the late, because this is what, 1999, right around the turn of the century, as it were, where
Oh,
we're about to kind of crest over that, and then the artwork is getting really cartoony. So I basically have cartoon characters, like they're basically Looney Tune characters. This comic is Looney Tune characters. You could have put Bugs Bunny and Daffy doing duck season and blowing each other's beaks off, and I think I would have been more entertained by it. So I that's might be a hot take on that, but not this is not for me.
Is it safe to assume that you didn't like the first Deadpool film then?
So, like I said, my journey has been interesting. Let me tell you that Deadpool as a character has soured for me, but the Deadpool film has delivered to me something that I unapologetically cannot criticize and I adore. The best version of Colossus we have ever gotten on film. Colossus, as because he's playing the straight
interesting.
foil, he comes straight out of the comics. He's better than any other appearance. Every other appearance Colossus had in the X films was forgettable. No one can remember a single line of dialogue he ever said. No one can remember his personality, and his outfit was completely forgettable. The minute Colossus walks onto the scene in the Deadpool film, he looks the part. He has the traditional X-Men kind of outfit. They did a perfect job of just toning the colors down just enough, but he's wearing his kind of very traditional looking outfit, and then he speaks in this boisterous Russian accent, and he is a superhero, but a Russian one. And he is everything I would ever imagine Colossus to be. And he unapologetically, genuinely embraces that. And they play off that for humor, but the humor never truly undermines who Colossus is, which is an honorable superhero. And it's the best version we've ever gotten. I wanted more. I want that version of Colossus. I want to see him more often. It's perfect. I don't even know if they intended it that way, but it is. If you like Colossus, then this is. I think you have to point at the Deadpool film as being your favorite movie.
But so if you hated this comic, then how can you stand watching the Looney Tunes representation of Deadpool that's presented on the film?
It's become harder. I think the first time I watched it, it was like just because it was doing something very different. I did enjoy aspects of that. On rewatches, it really wore out its welcome, especially with the overuse of, hey, we can use the F word. And it was just seemed to be peppered in for just the sake of they could do it. And so like it's like I said, parts of the Deadpool films have not worn on me. I do go back and watch certain scenes repeatedly. Some of the action scenes are really good. Like I said, any scene with Colossus in it is fantastic. Deadpool 2 has the Cable and Juggernaut fight scenes. Deadpool 1 in his character starts to grate on me after a while. So it's getting harder for me to watch and rewatch those films.
Can I kind of say so that first movie came out in 2016. I had to look it up to remind myself. And it's funny because it's like watching a movie on like a movie like a military movie on September 10th, 2001. And it's a different era. There's a positivism, it's like it's irreverent, but it has a self-confidence. It doesn't feel like it has to gesture or genuflect to some kind of the seriousness of the times, motif. It was just filmed and produced before, you know, Hollywood felt that it had to, pivot in a and there's actually something kind of fun. It almost feels like an artifact. It feels very dated for that reason, and, some of the 3D effects, I remember them being incredibly groundbreaking. Like, whoever, was doing the car chase scene on the highway, whoever produced that particular whatever studio was they they spent like a year of our time like showing us like behind this like all the different passes they did. And they already look pretty dated, which is hilarious. But yeah, overall, like I found it more rewatchable this time than I found it watchable back in the day.
Hmm.
Because I found back in the day it felt like I think I was more in agreement with what Twitless is saying, but now after what mm, after like 9 years, like it just feels like it's there's enough distance and it's standing on a different cultural position that it assumed that it just feels like a dinosaur in a way to make something this self confident and positive even while it's being irreverent, if that makes sense. Like it enjoys itself, and that's all it's meant to do. Even if I wouldn't write a script that way, I wouldn't enjoy writing characters like these sometimes. I appreciate that it's enjoying itself, and I haven't seen a Marvel movie that enjoyed itself in a while, Like, it just had to be hard, it had to be worrisome, it had to get with the times, the gravity of the moment, you know what I mean? So, it's kinda funny how that goes.
I think that's the reason why they had to go back to the well of the original Deadpool franchise to save the MCU, because it became so bogged down with all of these messages that they wanted to represent in the films, and it got away from what we actually enjoyed about the superhero genre, which is just
Yeah.
having fun. I liked the original Deadpool because the representation of that character, because it felt like he came into his own um, in the cinematic universe, and he was very distinguished, very unique from everything else that we'd seen previously. And a lot of that emergence and refinement of that character to be something very distinct from anything else, anywhere else, started in the Joe Kelly representation, where yes, it's a mess, it's all over the place. You can't make heads or tails of any of the storyline, but it's such a great platform for featuring this very large personality that kind of just jumps out of the page. And we hadn't seen it since John Byrne's She-Hulk, where we had a character then that was breaking the fourth wall, and she was also quite a bit larger than life and very popular in the comic scene. But to have a comedic superhero play at that level hasn't happened until we got Joe Kelly's representation of Deadpool. So love it or hate it, it's definitely something that has a lot of screen potential and screen presence, which is why I think the screenwriters went to this run when they were crafting exactly how they wanted to show the character on film for the first time.
I think it's also fair to say, because it may, even if it's not this run in particular, it's the fact that that's what kind of took root, and then Deadpool became this in the comics quite a lot afterwards. And then and you also have the things like with Joss Whedon's Buffy. comics started becoming, like I said, from different angles. Even things they started getting more quippy. All characters started sounding a little bit more like this. When you get to Bendis, and you have the entire cast of the X-Men, whoever's on the page, kind of sounding a little bit like Deadpool at this point, uh, being a bit self-referential. And the main thing at that point that separates Deadpool is the amount of you'll get out of it, and then how much he will talk about how he's in a comic, right? You'll get more of, definitely way more of that from him. But it definitely starts here for the character, and has its roots there. But a lot of people's understanding of that character, I think, comes from either this or downstream of this, and you kind of take your pick after a certain point. Um, but I guess where I if we're getting into concluding thoughts here, the only thing else I'll wrap up my thoughts by saying is that Family Guy meme where he's like, I'm not getting it so much. It insists upon itself, and I think that the Deadpool as a franchise and as a character insists upon himself a bit too much, and that's kind of why it's not hit me as well over time. But well, Red, what are your concluding thoughts of movie and comic?
Well, I mean, movie, I covered a little bit in the last video, but yeah, I do think that over the top aspect sells really well, and I think they didn't go back to that theme as strongly in the second film, but then they brought it way back in Wolverine and Deadpool. Just realized that that's what the audience wanted, and that's what people love about this character. And I think that what Joe Kelly did here is he decided to accentuate all of those attributes that Rob Liefeld had originally laid down, and just said, let's amplify this stuff to 11. And has been a formula for success. I wouldn't necessarily call it a reimagining of what Rob's initial rendition of the character was. Just like, with Batman, he just progressively would get darker and darker and darker over the years. But the original seedling of the dark attributes of the character were there all the way back, in the 30s when Bill Finger first, realized this representation of a dark figure that was going to stalk the night and put fear in the hearts of criminals. So just because you double down and triple down on that character archetype to make him absolutely distinct, doesn't mean that you necessarily were the originator of the structure for that character. So I wouldn't call this a reimagining. It's but definitely a huge amplification of the traits that Rob had outlined. Of course, this issue was the first one to break the fourth wall. There's a panel in here where Deadpool mentions, which issue he last encountered Bullseye. So that's a big mainstay for the character right now. He's breaking the fourth wall left and right, just breaking that thing down. And yeah, that's there's a lot of contributions here that were clearly made when there was inspiration being drawn for how to represent the character on film. And so kudos to Joe, kudos to Rob. All of that formula basically created something that's now become a cultural phenomenon for all of us to enjoy and look forward to seeing more of.
For legal purposes, I need to make sure that we respectfully pay, due diligence to Bob Kane, or the Bob Kane estate may come after us if we give all the credit to Bill Finger for Batman.
Right. Yeah.
Matt C, concluding thoughts on Deadpool.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, this Joe Kelly run helps me understand why there was so much animated visual humor in the 2016 movie with the eyes. I don't know if you guys know, with just like the solid white eye motif in the film was all completely CGI. So that's not Ryan Reynolds adding that, and it's it's fun to see, like, that becomes Looney Tunes in a way. The way that becomes an animated feature in the center of the face of the main character, the titular character that we've come to know and enjoy. And Joe Kelly kind of helps me better understand why you need animated eyeballs on this character. Uh, and while I think overall, this character is how we've figured out how to justify and reconcile ourselves with critiquing 90s comics, but also kind of smuggling it into current day so that we can enjoy it without too much, you know, without feeling bad, I guess. So, like, we're going to find a way to irreverently enjoy uh, the 90s. I think we also it smuggled some of the late 90s in there too with what's happening by this point, and we found a way to do it. I think where because we've talked about like the previous the this is the first time the fourth wall has been broken. Like She-Hulk's done it before, 10 years before this, but I think it seems like Deadpool as a character is someone who's just going to embody a lot of that more extreme content, and we're gonna allow him to kind of package all that stuff up. Uh, he gives us permission to enjoy it, I think. Whereas other IPs that did it first, other IPs that maybe at the time were famous for doing it, we're not going to remember that as much. I think, but these broad shoulders of Deadpool, clearly Liefeld invented what we're looking at, but things get explored and expanded and exaggerated by this period, and it's kind of fun to see that very appropriately expressed 20 years later in the film.
Thank you very much for checking out the video. Subscribe, like, and stay tuned for more.